Hi there. Today we will talk about localization in Laravel. Means here through the localization you can make your application multilingual, or you can say in more than one language. By default, when you install the default language version of Laravel, it interprets everything in English, and it has uh, related translation in resources lang folder. Under this folder you may have a multiple languages folder. So by default there is a en folder, and it has several files, each file related to the translation for some inbuilt operations. Like if we see the validation .php, it contains the several different messages for the each type of validation. Here you can define your custom messages also. I will cover the validation in my separate video, but in this video let's focus on the only on the translation. And if you see the password .php, so it contains the related messages. Okay, there is a configuration file Laravel provides, which exists in config folder and app.php. In app.php, you will find the locale. Okay, so it there is a default selection of en. Okay, you can change this whatever you want when your application it starts running. Okay, so let's start with this. So if you want to add more languages, then you have to add here in resources lang folder. So let's make another folder called es. Es stands for Spanish. You can uh, look into the different languages short name in ISO standard and can go through the documentation. So es derived from there. Okay, it is a not rocket science, it is a standard. So let's make it here the validation.php, and in the validation.php let's define some messages in Spanish. So new file validation.php, and this php file must return an array of messages. So let's copy it from here, from the default validation.php, and paste it here. Okay, and for the sake of different language, let's change it so we can differentiate it is in Spanish. I'm not going to translate it into Spanish, but let's add some identifier in Spanish. Okay, obviously you should have here the string in trans in Spanish. Okay, okay. So for the min validation, it will if your application throw a validation for the minimum length of a string here, then it will show this message. Okay, so let's go to our routes file web.php and throw a manually generated exception validation exception. So let's suppose let's create a validator quickly. Okay, and it has a make method, and let's request all. Okay, and let's our field let's have our field name name, and in this let's define the validation message, and it must have a minimum 10 characters. Okay, and let's diagram the error message like this. Okay, so if we refresh our base path, it has no messages currently because we have no name in our request. So let's pass it through the query string name Ajay, and we have now one. Okay, the name must be at least 10 characters because we have it here the 10 characters validation, but we want it in Spanish. You you can change your local on the fly using the app set local. Okay, like this, and pass the abbreviated version of your language. Yes, now we can if we refresh, then it must be in Spanish. Yes, in Spanish the name must be at least 10 characters. Okay, so like this, uh, you need to have the multiple languages folder related to the languages, respective the languages in your lang resource lang folders. Okay, so it is the one way to handle the validation. The other way, if you have a lots of string, and I think if you are going to if you are going to develop your site in multilingual, then you will have the enormous set of strings in translation. Then for this, Laravel provide feasible way in the lang folder. Just create the language code abbreviated name plus JSON file. Okay, this file will be parallel of the other folders in the lang. Okay, just keep it in mind, and it must have the translated string, the string you want to translate in your application. So let's define some. Okay, before this I want to go through the other configuration also. There is a one more configuration, the fallback local. Okay, the local will be a default, will be as a work as a default, and fallback local will be work as a if the current local is not available. Okay, so here, as we have set the ES language manually, let's comment it out. Okay, and in the app, if we define some XYZ local, okay, and the fallback set to the ES in Spanish. Okay, and if we refresh, then it will be in Spanish automatically because we have set the Spanish as a fallback, and if we change it to the EN, then it will be in English. Okay, So the fallback local work like this. Okay. The other configuration in app.php is the faker local. It is related to your when you create a number of fake records using factories in a Laravel. I will make a separate video on this. It's a separate thing, but you in Laravel you can create the fake records using the model factory. Okay, for that it uses that this configuration. Okay, so this is the configuration part. Let's set it to the default again. Okay, and in ESJSON earlier we have created what we have created. So before that, let's comment it out all this, and now refresh the Laravel. Let's translate this Laravel thing. So in ES, we need to provide the your translations in a JSON format. So you must keep in mind that you have to a valid JSON. Any error in this, your translation will not work in or Spanish. Okay, so we have defined one translation in a ESJSON, and let's manually set app set local, and in the template file there is a two you can say one is the directive and one is a global function helper function which you can use to translate your string. So the directory is a lang. You need to use like this. If there is a translation of Laravel, then it will return your translated string. Otherwise, the string will be returned by default as it is. Okay, Spanish Laravel, because I have used the lang directive here in the template, and I have set the app set local in our route. Or you can set in your controller or anywhere in your code. Where do you want? The other method, if you do not want to use this lang directive, the global helper like this. Okay, double underscore, then bracket, and then your string, and then closing it down. And if you refresh, it will work like a charm. Okay, like this. So you can have enormous strings translation in your JSON file. Okay, so your translation string can have the parameters. Okay, so let's suppose we have a dynamic parameter version like this. If you don't provide the parameters and use it as it is, then it will print like this. Okay, you have to mention your parameter colon and then parameter name in your uh, JSON file. Okay, and in your template file you have to pass that also, version 8.x like this. Okay, the second parameter. So let's say refresh it now and it will work. So you can have multiple parameters, and you can see it is in an array, and you can pass it uh, what numbers you want to have as a parameter. Okay. It's also case sensitive. If you define your key as a uh, capitalized form, and you are try to translate in a lowercase, then it won't work. Okay. To keep it in mind, sometimes it turn out very badly. Okay. The next thing I want to discuss pluralization in it's in a translation. It's a key part of your multilingual site. So let's have a example of apples. The pluralization means the the translated string must be must be act dynamically on the basis of the provided parameters. So let's understand with the help of example. So apples in outside octave, and okay, uh, we want to translate the apples on the basis of the numbers of apples we have. Like if we have a 0, then it must show no apple. If we have a one apple, then it shows single apple. Then if we have more than one apple, then it must show uh, many apples. Okay. So the second parameter with the count, we call the count. We will use as a count in the translation. It's a count we are defining. No apples. Pipe sign. Okay. If one, okay, then single apples. You have to you have to take care about the spacing thing. Okay. Sometimes you will get annoyed with this if your string not translated, then you have to check your translation, the spacing. Okay. Also use the double quotes in the JSON file. And two, and star more than two, and it will have infinite number, many apples. So on the basis of this, if we provide 0, then it must return the no apples, and if we pass the 1, it must return the single apples, and if single apple, sorry, no apple. Okay, and if it pass more than two or more than two, then it must turn the many apples like this dynamically. So first pass the 0, and let's refresh it. So we have to use the different function for this trans choice. Okay, using this you can have a dynamic translation on the basis of the parameter, or you can say you can have a pluralization of your translation. So if you refresh it, it will work. No apple. Okay. And if we pass the 1, then it returns a single apple, and if we pass that 5, then it returns the many apples. Okay, you can have also access this passed argument. This is called the count. Okay, count, count, and count. Okay, and if we refresh it, okay, many apples 5, we are passing 5. You can pass the other parameter also as a third argument in this, like name, right? Okay, and you can access here it as well, like this. Okay, and now if you refresh, any equals 500. Okay, so this is all about the translation. I hope it will help. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.